Joining us right now, I'm going to set the stage here. It's a Thursday evening for me, late afternoon, Thursday, I guess night by now in New York City for Jason Hehir, who is looking at some water in front of his apartment. You're going to hear noise in the background because Jason is amongst the people, I'm sure practicing social distancing and being safe. He is the director of the Last Dance, which we have been talking about. Everyone has been talking about now for weeks, if not more. He's been kind enough to join us after each and every episode, and as promised, we're not putting a time on this. We're just going to wrap everything up. How are you, buddy? How are you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm drinking a sweet tea.
Nice.
Yeah.
Kicking back, feet up?
Feet not up yet. I like to. I'm at attention right now. I've got to focus on the subject and get him comfortable, and then feet up maybe around question 3 or 4.
Okay. Well, let me know.
Okay, I appreciate that. What do you know now that you did not know the night before the release of this documentary's first episode?
How to conduct interviews, but how to perform during an endless. Sorry, man. They just started playing radio right over my shoulder.
That's okay.
I may have to take a walk here. Are you still rolling?
Yeah, go ahead. It's fine.
Okay. I think I certainly was a trial by fire for me to learn how to deal with media and deal with a lot of requests and a lot of the same questions and a lot of difficult questions and a lot of diplomacy and things like that, because we did this media push not just for domestic but for international too. So I was oftentimes on the phone with Asian morning shows, at nighttime New York time, and then domestic, East Coast shows in the morning and West. So that was an interesting process for me. I've never been through anything like that before. And then, what I know about the show is that it wasn't 100% positive, the response, but it was overwhelmingly positive. And so that was really gratifying for me and my team because, I was very nervous before the first 2 episodes came out. I was very nervous every Sunday before the episodes came out. Less so with 7, 8, 9, and 10 because those were less stale in my head. But episodes 1 and 2, I'd been watching those for the better part of a year, and I was so sick of them, it was impossible for me not to hate them by the time they came out. So to see the positive response that first week was a huge relief, because I in my mind, the series was going to get better from there. We just had to get a lot of exposition and boring stuff out of the way in 1 and 2. So the fact that people liked 1 and 2 was a big relief. So I guess I know that for in large part, the work that we did the past 2.5 years was worth it.
I know you grade yourself on a pretty hard scale, and I imagine these episodes are, like kids in a sense that they each have their ups and downs for you. But was there a particular? I think you've made it clear. I believe 7 might have been your favorite. Was there one that you were worried about? Was there one that you thought, oh man, I don't know how this is going to be received. This is weaker than the others, or whatever it may be. Was there one you were more worried about than the others?
Yes, I was worried about each of them for their own reasons. I could take you through one by one. Like 1 and 2, as I said, I was worried that was just exposition and that all of the basketball fans in the audience were going to there's going to be a deluge after the shows. It's like, we knew all this already. You're not telling us anything new. But we also had to educate people from the other side of the planet who have never seen Michael play and didn't know he went to UNC. Some people don't know what UNC even is. Some people can't name one-on-one goals. Some people don't know what team Michael Jordan played for. There was a ton of audiences we were trying to satisfy with it. So that threading that needle in the first 2 episodes, I was very worried about. Episodes 3 and 4 was very Pistons and Bulls centric. So it started to feel like more of a sports documentary. There's a lot of highlights in there, a lot of basketball. I was afraid that we would lose the non-basketball people. 5, particularly when we get into the Republican Buy Sneakers 2 thing, that deserves its own 2-hour documentary. The role of the African-American athlete and the expectations thrust upon them when they're in the spotlight, and whether or not that they should have to adhere to whatever standards have been set before by the Jim Browns and the Blue Rangers and the fastest way, Muhammad Ali's. So I was afraid that we were, going through that in 5 minutes, and that wouldn't be enough time, and we would take a huge hit for that. Episode 6 was again a lot of basketball. Sun series. I'm thinking like, what if you're not a basketball fan, why do you care about the back and forth of this Sun series or the Blazer series in 5? So those first 6, I had concerns about all of them. 7 and 8, I'm really proud of, and 9 and 10, we did those within the last 6 or 7 weeks. So just the fact that we made air with those, I'm really proud of. And at that point, you're just staggering across the finish line. So I didn't have time to be really worried at that point.
Did you at the end lean more towards, I could have done this in 8, I could have done this in 6, I could have done this in less episodes, or did you lean towards, I wish I had a couple more episodes? I mean, in your mind, could this have been longer and still maintain the entertainment and quality that I know you look for in your work?
I think the episodes could have been longer. I know that there are anecdotes and sound bites and moments that we had to leave on the floor because I've said it before, each one of these had to be exactly 50 minutes long, including the credits. Every single one had to be on the dot 50 minutes. And some of these deserved, especially the earlier episodes when we're doing guys' backstories and there's so many stories about not just Michael. Michael at UNC and Michael in high school could be easily its own hour. And we had to put that down to like 8 or 9 minutes, I think, or maybe 13 minutes. But also Scotty and Dennis's backstory. Dennis, they did a whole documentary on, so we left a ton of stuff on the floor because I figured that was redundant. Phil Jackson's story. I mean, Phil, you could do a several-part series on the life of Phil Jackson. You could do a scripted television series about a guy like Phil Jackson going down to Puerto Rico and coaching in that crazy league that he was in down there, where they're shooting referees and they're putting blood of dead chickens on the bench to curse teams. It was wild. So we had to really fly through a lot of that stuff, and that's, for me, that's the stuff that I'm the most interested in. I'm a huge sports fan, but I care way less about the actual results of the games than I do about people playing them.
Well, then I'll skip ahead. I was going to save this for later. We every Monday before we'd bring you on, we'd spend a half an hour recapping the night before, and then these last couple of days, we've given out awards, like who was the non-Jordan MVP, who came off the best, who came out the worst, blah, blah, blah. And one of the questions was if you could spend a couple of days with one of the main characters from the film not named Michael Jordan, who would it be? And mine was Phil Jackson. I'm curious if you could spend 48, 72 hours in whatever environment you pick with one of the characters, was there one that stood out more than the other than Michael?
Her.
Yeah.
I would talk about so many other things besides that. It still might be too deep to spend 48 hours with you.
Right.
I mean, if you like peyote or whatever, I don't know what he's doing up in Montana. So that would be fun for a certain demographic of the audience. They would probably love to spend 2 days with him. I just spending time with Steve Kerr and his mom at their house. Like a weekend with them would be fascinating. I just love those two people. I've really, really respected so much and love spending the brief time that we spent with them. That was in his apartment in New York City, and he let us into his home, and we interviewed him and had a great time with him, and he was thrilled to be a part of it. And Will Perdue reached out and said that his kid thinks he's so cool now because he was in this thing, and guys that are names, they're not necessarily marquee names, but they're names that I grew up watching them play, and I certainly knew who all of them were. Just to humanize them and to see that they are kind of like getting a little kick out of being in this thing and thrilled to be a part of the story. That's been an unexpected bright spot in this thing. But I think if I could, and Roy Williams too would be close on that list or high up on that list of people I'd like to spend time with, because that guy is just a walking anecdote. His batting average for gems in the interview was like 950. Everything I asked him about, he says it perfectly. He says it with perfect diction and perfect elocution, and he's got that southern accent. He's just like old homuncular guy, and he's got hundreds of stories, not just about Mike, but all the time in basketball. He could not have been nicer to him. So there's a lot, but I would, for the sake of your question, I would put Kerr at the top of it.
It's funny, you went the same place with Phil I did. You said we actually mentioned peyote in Montana. we started wondering either, if Phil still smoked weed, who was his dealer, or did he actually grow it himself. We aired on the side of growing yourself, and then we started thinking about a spinoff where you had Don Nelson, Snoop Dogg, Willie Nelson, and Phil Jackson playing poker and making that like a weekly show with just being a fly on the wall. Went off on a whole tangent there. He's a fascinating, and he was also my vote for the guy that came off the best. I was more amazed with Phil Jackson's coaching prowess after this documentary than I was before, and I already thought he was the best basketball coach of all time.
Yep. Yeah, you know what? I'm glad, because I think that, especially, I'm sitting in New York City right now, and I know that here locally, it definitely tainted his legacy, his time with the Knicks, and whether it's his fault or not, I don't even know enough to get into that. I just know that it definitely, it's not the way you want to go out. But I'm glad that we could remind people how great he was, how effective he was, how genuine a guy he is. And by the way, he won 5 more rings, as you will know, being a Sacramento fan, after he left. Championship rings, and then was it 1 or 2 with the Knicks? So he was outstanding to get to know. Fun fact that I haven't told anybody yet, because I haven't thought to even bring it up. That house, we interviewed him in his backyard in Montana. The house behind him in the distance, that like kind of log cabin looking house, he built that with his bare hands with his brother.
Get out of here! Really?
Yeah, he built that house with his brother decades ago. It wasn't like he moved to Montana because he got rich and decided like that's where he wanted to spend his twilight years. He's been there he's like a Montana hipster. He thought Montana was cool before anybody did. And that house is built, I think the house is at least 50 years old. I think he built it like in the 70s.
Wow. And
built it with his brother. Hand built that.
Talking to Jason Hehir, I should probably reset the director of the Last Dance, and that brings me to speaking of Phil and a lot of these other subjects. I have very little memory. It was 7 years ago of when we sat down. 6 years ago when we sat down for down in the valley, and we'll get to that in a bit. There wasn't a lot of preparation other than I knew the subject matter. And then the only thing I remember is I think occasionally you would ask a question and then I would kind of repeat the question at the start of my answer just for the film's sake. When you went in, was there much, obviously Michael's different, but with a guy like Phil, a guy like Dennis, Isaiah, was there much in preparing them? Did they have printouts? Did you tell them this is what goes into preparing an average subject for this film?
With Dennis, it was pointing to the chair that I needed him to sit down in. That was the extent of the preparation.
Gotcha.
Sit there and talk to me.
Right.
Yeah, we offer. We certainly don't give the questions ahead of time and let people. I have no problem giving questions ahead of time if it's like, where did you grow up? Like, these are the kind of things we're going to be talking about. The only information that I would really give somebody that was detailed was like scores of games or like the score of a series that took place back in the 80s. Like, did we win that in 5 games or 6 games? You want them to come in having done their homework, or at least having been briefed. And some people actually paid attention to what we sent them, and some people said whatever. Michael was in the camp that was like, whatever, I didn't even look at what you sent me, just ask me, and I remember everything, and I'm going to tell you the truth. That's what he told me. So that was easy. With a guy like Isaiah and Phil, both of them, they both pulled me aside before the interviews and asked essentially the same question, which was, sorry, there's a plane going overhead here. I don't want your viewers to be, or your listeners to be deafened.
That's fantastic. Jason's outside.
I think the Millennium Falcon just came over. Okay, I'm alive.
We're good.
I think the Super Bowl's about to kick off. They both asked the same question, which was, who is the one telling the story? Who's the one making the decisions? Who's the director? What does that mean? Who's asking me the questions? Who wrote this interview? And what research have you done? Both of them were very concerned about that.
Okay.
So, I mean, and when I say very concerned, it means we had probably a 6-minute conversation about this. But they just wanted to know, I think, that they were in trustworthy hands that knew the story and were going to tell it responsibly. But as far as prepping people, like it pretty much was I was relying on people to just give me what they knew off the top of their head.
Well, you also interviewed two different presidents of the United States, and I'm curious. I imagine getting them to do it might have been a different road than you had to go with many others, but was the preparation to them, did they have different, you're sitting with presidents, I mean, is that a different thing, or just, hey President Obama, hey President Clinton, thanks, here's the questions?
Yeah, that's a lot different, because you have background checks and there's Secret Service comes through and sweeps the room. They were literally looking at sight lines for outside, and when you think of like the gravity of that, like it's chilling that like they're looking at where someone could be stationed on another rooftop that they would have access to, you know, if they wanted to do something, to look in and have a bead on a president. So that's a total. I mean, they didn't do that for Will Perdue when we interviewed him.
Right.
But with those guys, yeah, I mean, they have staffs that are literally over their shoulder all day long, briefing them on what's coming up next, because their schedules are down to the minute. And I'll tell a story about Bill Clinton in a second that says how we violated that schedule through no fault of my own. It was just kind of a wreck that day. But yeah, we gave them just an idea of the topics that we'll be talking about. And with the Clinton thing, when we talked about, like with Obama, it was clearly like, we want to talk to you about your formative years in Chicago, watching the team. I mean, he told us a lot of stories about being in Cambridge, going to Harvard, and in this tiny apartment and watching the Bulls and trying to get the Bulls on like his TV with the rabbit ears and all that. And there's a lot of stuff we had to leave out. We interviewed him for probably like 40 minutes, and you saw that there were only a few sound bites in the doc. With Clinton, the only time that he was in the doc was talking about watching Scotty in Arkansas when he was the governor. And that came up incidentally. I think I literally said during the interview, like, "Oh my God, you were there!" Like I knew we were going to ask him about Hamburg, and I said, "Do you know where Hamburg is? Are you familiar with Hamburg?" And he said, "Yes, I was the governor for 12 years." And it was said in such a way. I knew he was the governor, and that's why I asked him about it. Was for him to give us a sense of the abject poverty that Scotty grew up in, and Scotty's family did that as well as Clinton did. So I deferred to the family with that. But I said, "Did you ever see him play?" And he started telling me stories of seeing him play and meeting him, and that's what ended up being in the doc. The story about the prep though with him is that I don't know if you saw that the promo that aired over Christmas break was like all the big stars that are going to be in it with that big hip hop track.
Yep.
And Bill Clinton is seen combing his hair in that.
Yep.
Well, our makeup artist was stuck on a train, and she texted me like, she's supposed to be there, you know, an hour and a half. We're interviewing the president, and you know, if you're on time, you're very late for interviewing the president. So she's supposed to be there like 2 hours beforehand, and 20 minutes to roll time, she's nowhere to be found. And she texted me and said, "I'm stuck on a train. I mistimed coming from Brooklyn. It's taking a lot longer." And I had to be calm, but I was livid inside.
Sure.
And I have Secret Service people coming in and saying, "The president's going to be ready in 12 minutes. The president's going to be ready in 2 minutes." He's like, "Well, Jason's not going to be ready in 2 minutes because we don't have a makeup person here." So they grabbed a comb from somewhere else in the office, and President Clinton did his own hair for the interview. And it went off without a hitch, but that's why he's seen combing his hair. Is he's literally prepping himself for being on camera because the makeup person we hired was late. So if that could happen, I got a good Oakley story for you. So Charles Oakley, that's another guy that you might want to hang out with for a couple of days. I mean,
right.
Don't say the wrong thing to him, and it's going to be a lot less than a couple of days. But so he was one of the hardest people to book, and certainly one of the most intimidating to be around. Anyone who knows the stories of Charles Oakley, he's not a guy that you want to upset.
Right.
So we have been chasing him for over a year, and finally we booked him for like a Sunday in the summer. I think it was like 1 year ago. I forget. I can't even tell what time it is these days. But we finally booked him. It was going to be for a Saturday morning, and on Friday night, my producer walked into my office. This is like 7 p.m. And he said, "Did you see Oakley's Instagram?" I said, "No." And I looked it up, and it was Charles Oakley. He was in Saint-Tropez live. And he's like, "What's up, everybody? Hey, chilling here in Saint-Tropez." I was like, "What we're supposed to interview you at 8 a.m. tomorrow. What is going on right now? And so I don't know what he did and invent the space-time continuum, and he said he's all set for the next day. So we were supposed to interview him at the Plaza. He said, I'm staying at the Plaza in New York and interview me there. And this was like, we've been searching for him forever. And there were no rooms at the Plaza for us to rent to interview him in. So I said, all right, you know what? We're just going to have to tell him when he meets us in the lobby, Charles, we're not doing it here. We're going to do it somewhere else close by. And just be cool about it. And hopefully he'll just come with you. So we rented a room at the closest hotel, which is the Essex House, which is like a block away. Now, the interview is supposed to start at 8. The call time is at 8, and the interview is supposed to start at like 9. And our cameraman misread. It's the same guy who shot with you, your interview for Down in the Valley.
Okay.
He misread the schedule and thought the call time was at 10. So, again, you're supposed to be there like an hour ahead of time. And, sorry, they're now scraping the concrete next to me to get all the dirt out. This is something that happens once a year. I'm
right.
Sure.
You picked a good day.
The F-15s will go over in a second, too. So the camera guy is now speeding up the Jersey Turnpike to get to our place on time because he thinks that he doesn't have to be there for 2 hours. And meanwhile, I'm going over to meet Charles Oakley in his hotel room, knowing that we don't have any cameramen to film him. And I have to tell him, we're not doing this at your convenience where you wanted us to do it. I had to walk you down the streets of New York City and bring you to a hotel suite where there is no camera. So I'm literally, we have this PA named Jill, and she's the sweetest girl. She's awesome. She was a rock star for us for a couple of years, but she's only like 21, 22, and she looks like she's about 14.
Right.
And I said, all right, Joe, you're coming with me to meet him in the lobby because he's not going to beat me up in front of you. That was literally the reason why. I was like, he's less likely to get violent or very upset if there's someone there who he thinks might be scared. So I literally, Dave, was speaking to him slower like this to buy time, because I thought if I speak that slow over the course of 20 minutes, it might buy me like 3 minutes.
Sure.
That's how nervous I was for like. So we get to the room, and the camera guy was getting there at the exact same time, and we had to act like, yeah, this is what we normally do. He's like, man, you guys aren't even set up yet. Like he's already pissed off because we made him walk a block and a half, and he had just gotten into. I think he just got hit by a car, so he's limping. And I was like, I thought he was going to say like, you know, I pulled my hamstring or something. I said, what happened? He said, oh man, I got hit by a car. This is like, I'm sure the car got the worst of it, Charles Oakley. So he's like gently limping to this place, and I was like, yeah, our camera guy got in a car accident. He's like, man, I just got hit by a car. I don't care if your guy gets. I was like, oh, stop saying, Charles, everything's gonna be okay. Don't worry.
He's thinking you're high.
Yeah, seriously. Probably wanted some. So we get up to the room, and Jake, my producer, who was a saint and a genius, knows everything about sports. And the James Dolan thing had happened about a year before that. So Jake, knowing we had to buy time, I literally was just saying, so Charles, what'd you have for breakfast? Like hoping that he was going to be like, oh man, I got to tell you about this bagel. It's going to take me a while. So the camera got to take his time. He was like, pancake, like nothing. Like
right.
Just let's go. He wanted to get out of there. Well, yeah, more air traffic.
Oh, he just got back from San Tropez, and you made him walk.
So he said, Jake was like, hey man, what was that thing that happened with you a while back at MSG? And I'm thinking, like, does Jake not know this, or is he trying to upset this man, or what? It was the thing that happened with James Dolan when they kicked him out.
Yeah.
And so he was like, oh man, they wanted to kick me out, and Jake starts playing dumb. He's like, what? Well, did you play for the Knicks? Well, why wouldn't they want you there? Tell me everything. Go through step by step the entire. And meanwhile, our camera guy is furiously setting this thing up.
Right.
That's why if you look at that camera shot, the camera's a little bit too close to Charles.
Uh-huh.
Normally we have time to tweak that and like really lock it in. This time was just like, sit down, I'm going to start asking these questions. Because we had killed an hour and 15 minutes of the man's day at that point.
Right.
So it's not every single interview has a story like that, but a lot of them have. The booking process of this, wrangling all of these people, could be its own documentary about the making of this documentary. Absolutely could be its own documentary or scripted film.
I told you that before you started. Remember, we got into a thing about it. I say, dude, you got to make a making of the making. You got to do behind the scenes. You don't want any part of that, but it'd be fascinating.
No, So, and those stories will go to my grave with me because we have trusted partners, but a lot of people, they had different visions for what this thing was going to be. And I don't mean agendas. I don't mean like Jordan's people wanted to protect his image and we were trying to, it's not like that. And I know that people want to believe that. And that's why that propaganda stuff just really eats at me because it's not true. And because we fought so hard to make sure that wasn't going to be true, that I wouldn't take offense. I would just roll my eyes at it if I didn't put blood, sweat, and tears into so many conversations about this thing, for years.